Hi, I'm Frank. This is the first video in a series I'm going to put up regarding constructing chords using intervals and scales. Chords are really important, certainly in Western music. They come up all the time, and having the ability to construct them means you need to understand how we pull intervals from scales so that we can go ahead and always come up with the same kind of chord regardless of where we're starting from. That is to say, regardless of what the root is. So today we're going to work mostly with the C major scale. And what we're also going to do is introduce this idea that a distance from one note to the next is an interval. A scale is really just a collection of specific intervals that always occurs in the same way. So in the case of the C major scale, we're going to go ahead and lay out the 7 notes of Western music. That is to say, starting on C, we're just going to go to D as in dog, go to E, go to F, then G, then A, then B as in boy. To continue, I would start on C again, which would just be the octave. Quick reminder, octave is just the same note name in a different position. In this case, going from the C on the 3rd fret of the 5th string to C on the 1st fret of the 2nd string is an octave. So those 7 names, once again, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, give us a C major scale. The beauty of C major is there's no sharps or flats to worry about. So when we want to work with chords that are diatonic to that key, diatonic being a fancy way of saying that belong within that key, we don't have to worry about a sharp or a flat. In fact, if we accidentally stumble on a sharp or a flat as we're creating chords within the key of C, then we know that we've gone outside of that key. And for our purposes, that's not what we want to do right now. The other thing to understand is an interval. An interval, as I said earlier, is the distance from one note to the next. If I'm on C, my first note, root note, and I go up to D as in dog, the next string open, it's the same as moving to the 5th fret of the 5th string. That distance of 2 frets away from C to D is called a whole step. In the case of intervals we use to build chords, specifically the major and minor ones we're going to work with today, we're mostly going to be dealing with whole steps and half steps. So once again, whole step is C to D, then if I went up just 1 fret, that's my half step distance. So the 2 main intervallic distances that we work with for the triads we're about to build are major thirds and minor thirds. That's all we need to know right off the bat. And by the way, all of this is actually summarized in a PDF, which is linked to in the description for this video. So if you want to go ahead and refer to that either at the same time or after the video, I think it would make a lot of difference because it's a little bit easier usually to see these kind of concepts in print or at least on a screen in the case of a PDF. So a major third, as I said, is a whole step plus another whole step. So if I went from C past D as in dog to E, the next note in the alphabet after D as in dog, I just went a major third in this case. Why? Because I traveled 2 whole steps, C to D, D to E. Anytime I do that, I've gone up the interval of a major third. That's great because that happens to be the first 2 notes in our C major triad, the first triad we're building today. C to E is a major third apart, and that forms a major third because of the fact there are 2 whole steps. From the E, if I go up a step and then a half step after that, the distance of 1, 2, 3 frets, I arrive at the note G. G can also be played as the open 3rd string, just as a reminder. Turns out that distance is a minor third, 1.5 steps. So going from E to open G gives me a minor third. It also gives me what's called the 5th of a C major triad. Why would it be the 5th? Logical question. Well, if we start on C once again and we replace with numbers all the notes that I talked about at the start, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the 5th note in the C major scale is G. That's why we call it a 5th. Whenever you move 5 notes away from a note in the musical alphabet, you're playing the 5th of the note you started on. So the 3 notes that make up C major are C, E, G, and really, all I need to take from that right at this moment is the pattern that I used to build it. From the note I started on, I went up a major third, 2 whole steps. And then from that note, I went up a minor third, which is a step and a half, or 1 fret less than a major third. In this case, if I move to the note F and I do the exact same pattern of construction, up a major third, I arrive at A. From A, if I go up a minor third, I arrive at C, which can also be played on the 1st fret of the 2nd string. So that's another major triad, F, A, C. Why? Because I started on F and went up a major third, landed on A, then from there went up a minor third and landed on C. Since none of those notes are sharps or flats, they're all in the key of C. And that specific shape the distance going from major third and then minor third, gave me the same kind of triad that I had when I started on C and went up the same distances. So again, I'm referring to the intervals, major third and minor third, to really help with that. Now the last major triad that occurs diatonically in the key of C begins on the note G. We're going to test that to make sure right now. If I'm on G and I go up 2 whole steps, or a major third, I arrive at B, 4th fret of the 3rd string, or open second string. So G to B, even though there are 2 open strings on the guitar, are actually the distance of a major third. From B as in boy, if I go up a step and a half, I arrive at D as in dog on the 3rd fret of the 2nd string. That's a minor third. So G, B as in boy, D as in dog are the 3 notes that make up a major triad if I start on the note G. Now, when it comes to shapes on guitar, I'm a big believer that you want to notice them as often as you can, because that way you can move things around a little more easily. If I take the shape that I used for F, A, C, notice it was one different finger across 3 different strings. If I start that 1 step higher, meaning 2 frets higher, with my 3rd finger moved from F to G, and these fingers follow, I have the same 3 notes I just mentioned for the G major triad. G, B as in boy, D as in dog. Best of all, I've got a shape that I can readily rely on. There it is in F, here it is in G. So it's the exact same shape, it physically looks the same. What I'm doing is reorienting it based on where the 3rd finger is, because that's my root note, the home note, the most important note to help define this particular triad. So, F major, G major. Now, if I want to play C major, I have to drop down to the 3rd string for now. C, E, G. In this case, it involved an open string. That has to do with the way the guitar is tuned and the fact that the 2nd string is a half step lower than the remaining strings around it. But again, this is where shapes can be handy, because if I can remember that shape for F and know that if I move it anyway from there, I'm simply playing a major triad shape, but with a new name. That's how I figured out this F major shape is also a G major shape when I move it a whole step up, F to G. All right, so those are the major triads. What about the other triads? Well, in the case of a major scale, there's always 3 major triads, 3 minor triads, and then what we call a diminished chord. We're not going to go into the diminished chord now because that has its own unique way of being built in terms of intervals. It's a little bit different than major and minor. But in the next video, I'm going to show you how to build 3 minor chords out of the C major scale. And we're going to use a pattern that is very similar to what we just used to construct these 3 major chords. I also want to reiterate once again how there is a link to a PDF, single-page PDF, which provides all this in print form so that you can review all the stuff we covered today in the video. If anything isn't clear, of course, you can always rewatch, but I think having that PDF in front of you with the explanations that are mentioned there can also be very handy as you start processing this idea of constructing chords, diatonic chords, from a major scale. Take care.